if I wanted the vision that I had for the exquisite relationship that I had this opportunity to create, I had to be the woman in that vision, not be the woman that I am now. Seeing that differential was enough for me to start making changes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Unstoppable Woman podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today and for being a loyal listener or for tuning in for the first time. We have a great topic to discuss today, which is something that Ariana Golub, my partner in, not crime, my partner in content, how about that? Another C word, came up with as a really, really good topic for us to dive deeper in. I had done a short on this a little while ago, and it was on deflecting desire and why that's a problem and what it represents. So we're going to really look at how this plays out for the ambitious woman and how it keeps you from your exquisite life, even though you think that it's not, how to really recognize when you're in deflection rather than actual movement forward. Okay, with that as the frame up, I'm going to hand the mic over to the proverbial mic over to Ariana. Thank you for being my partner in content here and leading this interview. So you got the reins.
Yeah, so I think you kind of kicked it off exactly how I was thinking about it, because I had watched that recording not too long ago, and I feel like it's a topic that's worth diving into, because I feel like when you're talking about creating an exquisite life, making changes, the desired changes that we want for ourselves, your first step, or one of your first steps, is always you have to claim your desires. And I think that's easy for us to say, right? Like, I want this, I want that. And that's pretty simple. But then we end up maybe doing something a little bit different. And I think what is interesting is that it's not that, especially ambitious women, it's not that they're like sitting around doing nothing. They end up, sort of doing the productive stuff and then not acting in alignment with their desires. So I felt like I wanted to dive deeper into this topic with you, because I feel like that's almost an aha moment even for myself when I hear it, because of course I have my own desires and I'm like, I wonder how often I deflect as well. So I think it'd be cool for you to talk more about this whole idea and then make it really easy for people to like recognize when they might be doing it, because they might be very productive and still doing really important things, but it's not going after that desire. And then, of course, I think really what people would want to hear is like, how do they stop? What do we do to not deflect our desires? So let's start with the first thing. Let's just talk about, more about like the concept of deflecting desires and what that is and what that looks like.
Yeah. There's so many ways that this shows up. So this is a great topic. So first place I want to really articulate is sometimes we deflect desires by not claiming them, saying, that's not for me. I don't want that. For instance, a lot of really independent, ambitious women say, I'm fine by myself. I don't want to be in a relationship. Or another one that I've used many times, I love my work. It's not work, it's play when you love something, but you're working 12, 14 hours and you're burning yourself out, right? Like what are the stories we tell ourselves again and again and again that are the justifications, are the rationales, and they feel like 60% correct? Like they kind of feel right. Yeah, that's true. That's true for me. But it's the good spin on the challenge. It's making lemonade out of lemons. And so I would first ask you to see if you're not claiming the desire that you really want. So for me, I was working 10, 12, 14-hour days and saying that I loved it, right? Like I was like the Kobe Bryant of entrepreneurship. I was on the court first and like on the court last. Like I just was like, I was going to, put more reps in than everyone else. That was my identity. That was my belief about myself. Like that's how I thought I was going to grow the business. And yet I had this desire for more spaciousness, right? I had this desire for more connection, for deeper friendships, for more exquisite kind of love in my life, romantic love. And yet I was telling a story about it and not claiming it both. Okay. So that might sound confusing because I just said I wanted it, but it was under the surface. I wanted it maybe secondarily, or it was a suppressed desire versus a very conscious, articulated desire. So the first thing to look at around this is, are you being honest with yourself about what you truly desire? And I wanted more spaciousness. I wanted a more exquisite relationship where I felt really seen, very supported, loved, sexy, adored, all of that. So much more. And I wanted a different kind of business, right? There were so many desires that I wasn't yet ready to articulate. And so I deflected, right? I said, this is what we're growing in the business. This is my initiative here. These are the goals. And they were all rational and justified. You won't make up a reason that doesn't make logical sense to you. Okay. So that's like a little red flag, or like a little nudge in the back of your head. Are you making this kind of statement again and again? There's a particular kind of feeling that goes with that. And you know where you're off course, but you're like committed to that story.
One is that it sounds as if we deflect towards our shoulds, right? Like, I should want this or do this or have this, rather than actually listening to it, which comes to brings me to my second point of and I think is connected to what you said about feeling, in the sense of it's like a heart versus head situation. Like, we live up here making decisions from our shoulds, and maybe there's that heart piece that needs to come in where we actually feel for what it is that we want and be honest with ourselves, versus showing up based on what we should be doing or what the expectations are, from society, from our family, from friends, whatever, wherever it comes from.
100%. Oftentimes there's societal pressure, but then there's also, and that's sort of we all get that. We get the societal pressure. What I think is less obvious is the pressure that comes from inside. And this is your identity. This is where your identity or your self-image, how you see yourself, which is your identity, this is where that drives your decision. So you might say, this would be an example from my personal life. You might say, oh, I want a particular kind of relationship. I want this exquisite relationship, but my identity was I'm unlovable. That was a core wound. If you want more information on core wounds, we have stuff on the podcast on our homepage. We have a lot of stuff on core wounds, so you can go check that out. That's at theunstoppablewoman.com. But I had a core wound of being unlovable. That was my identity. And so that then drove my decisions that said, I have to pour everything into work, into these goals where I had an identity that said, I'm masterful at that. I'm good at that. I'm going to succeed there. It's not just even an identity issue, because we all want to do things that we feel successful at. I did not feel successful at relationships. Now, I've had relationships, right? I was married. It was a great partnership in so many ways, great guy. I was in a relationship after that was also, really good, but it ultimately wasn't what I desired, and it wasn't this exquisite thing. And I had to face the reality that this wasn't what I desired in order to claim what I desired. So we do throw ourselves into the doing. We throw ourselves into, especially as ambitious women. So that was your point, and also my next point, which is that for many people, they know that they're deflecting desires because they're not doing anything. Okay. They're like, oh, I want this, but I'm not willing to take action. For the ambitious woman, for the doers in this world, you'll say, oh, I want this, but all of these things have to come first, or I have to get this done first, or I'm so busy doing this, right? Or I can't do that. I just had a conversation with someone who was going to come to our Exquisite Life Plan event, and she really wanted to come to it. She was like all in, very curious, very engaged. And, but her schedule was booked so tight that by the end of our short little conversation, she had to hop and we didn't finish talking about it. And so we rebooked, which is fine, totally get it. But her calendar got so impacted that she had to cancel that. And she's like, oh, I'll deal with that later. She was interested in the Exquisite Life Plan event because she wanted more spaciousness in her business, in her life. She wanted to learn how to create that, but that was too challenging. Well, this is without having a further conversation with her, in all respect here, my analysis from a distance is like, that's the old self-image, the old identity coming up. I don't have time, right? That's how you see yourself, as someone who's too busy to create spaciousness. You're going to deflect the very things that are going to create that for yourself. Now, she's working on a lot of things. It's not that she's not active, busy doing things, but it's not working on the thing that is the core desire.
I know we'll definitely get there, but I mean, I think that's the perfect picture of like, here's a person who wants something, spaciousness, and is like, so weighed down by the complete opposite with having a schedule like this. And, it's almost like, how does she even get out of that cycle? Which I want you to talk about that, because that's hard, right? Like, you have this crazy schedule and it's for good things. It's for good reason, for business, for life, whatever it needs to be. So how do you even get out of that? Because you could just go into that cycle over and over again until something finally hits. So we'll get to the how, but I just wanted to point it out because it's so like picture perfect.
One of the ways you know that you're deflecting, right? Because that's one of the things we want to cover is like, how do you know if you're deflecting a desire, is that you find yourself in the same pattern again and again. So in this case is, I make all these changes to my schedule. I put in new rules with my executive admin, with my COO. I block schedule. I do different things. I say I'm doing 4-day weekends. I'm not taking calls at this time. Trust me, I've done all of this, right? And then you fill that time with more stuff. And so you have to break your rules. Okay. And you find yourself creating the same chaos that you had before. Or you say, no more initiatives because blah, 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 blah. We can't handle it. And then you add 5 more, right? All with legitimate, logical reasons. You're smiling because I've done this before. Okay. Like,
yes.
So like truth and transparency, totally like exposing myself. Like the way I know these patterns is often because I've lived these patterns, and you have to at some point recognize your patterns, and it becomes intolerable to you anymore to go into the story and the deflection and the ways in which we self-sabotage, and you make a different decision. And it's not quite the topic of this podcast, but I think it's important to say that the one of the ways that I was able to do this was I got leverage over myself. I talk about leverage a lot with my clients. Like, what's the leverage here? Because it either has to be a desire worth failing for, right? Like you just want it so badly. So that's what it was when my first big breakthrough in the business, I would say, was when I went from making 138K to 700K in 1 year. I 5 times my income. I was going for $1 million, right? My goal was $1 million. And that was a desire worth failing for. I was willing to like fall on my face. I was willing to be disappointed. I was willing to experience the shame. I was willing to fail and put in the time and effort and determination in order to do that. I got hooked by that desire. Okay. Ultimately, we got to that 7-figure mark and further, but that was the big thing in that time. The next thing that was a leverage point for me was when I got in this relationship with James, was that, I realized oh my God, here's this man that I've manifested, right? I got really clear on the relationship that I wanted and the type of person I wanted to be with. Here he is. Check, 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 check. Like 100% I was like, wow, I flipped my hair back. I'm good. Right? Like that was pretty amazing. And yet I realized I couldn't keep running my business and my life in the sort of go hard way that I was, even though I thought I was creating, space for the feminine in my life. I was, still booked back to back and like going hard. I was not going to be able to maintain and create this exquisite relationship if I kept that up. So that was a leverage point for me. I wanted that more than my addiction to my old identity, my old belief structure, my old way of being, which was a deflection for years to keep me away from the spaciousness that I wanted. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, but I'm already in a great relationship, but maybe that's not your leverage point. It doesn't have to be that, but there has to be something that is more important to you than the way you're doing things that you use as leverage to move through the deflection. So it's a little bit of the how right there, but important to point out now in this context.
Would you say that even though deflection is not what we want, right? It's not like, it might be things that we need to do in some way, but it's not what we want. Would you say that there is something about like, it's actually more comfortable because it is that pattern, it is that identity. So it's so hard. It's like, well, this is actually what I know and I'm comfortable with it. So I'm just going to keep doing this. Would you say that comes up for a lot of people? Because, it seems like, again, it's like that stuck, like they're just in that loop.
100%, 100%. It's the enemy we know, keep them close. Keep the enemy close, because the enemy you don't know, holy smokes, right? Who knows what's going to happen?
Even though it's like,
yeah.
Right. It's going to bring you closer to what you want, but you have no idea how it's going to go. So that's scary.
It really is. In your subconscious, here's the interesting thing. Your subconscious mind has a really strong directive, and it is to keep you alive. This is a very primal, primitive aspect of the subconscious mind, and it's very black and white. Are you going to die from this, or are you going to live from this? Okay. Anything that you've already survived, even if it's causing you pain, okay? Even if it's causing you pain, it's survivable. You haven't died from that yet. Consciously, you're like, I hate this. I don't want to create this again. This is this pattern. Wow, I keep dating the same men. That wasn't me, but that's been people, right? I keep dating the same men.
I feel like that's the example I was gonna
bring that up. It's a great analogy, because we all know this. Either it's us or our girlfriends, right? We can see these patterns. Like, why are you dating this guy again? Like, this is, so, or you have trust issues, right? You keep partnering with people in business who embezzle money or break their word to you or don't support you, right? And that's a pattern for you, right? And so we keep these things up, and although we don't want them, like consciously, we're saying, no, I want this instead. I desire this. This is insane. It's not a conscious, like, why would I partner with someone who is untrustworthy? No one consciously does this, okay? We just don't. But subconsciously, our subconscious mind says, that's safe. That red flag, that thing that you're going to ignore, that's actually safe because you've been there before and you survived it. And so this is what keeps us trapped in patterns. And oftentimes you can't see it. It's the forest for the trees. You have your own blind spots and you need someone else. This is what I do for women, is like to help people see the pattern, see the drivers, and see alternatives. Because oftentimes what happens is when you maybe you see your pattern, maybe you see the drivers, but you can't see an alternative. You're in the forest for the trees. That's the only known world that you have. So you can't really see, a way out or how else you can do it. And yet there's a methodology and there's a way and there's an opportunity for you, but you have to step outside of that. Yeah.
You had mentioned that, the pattern is one way that we know that we're, in this deflection. Is there anything else in particular that like can help us understand, right? Because you said sometimes we are not able to see it. Like, is there anything else that someone can look for besides? I think pattern is a big one, because I think if we all sit down for a few minutes, we can recognize our own patterns, even if they're a hard pill to swallow. But is there anything else?
That's something I just shared on someone else's podcast today that I was on. And I said, we're smart women. If you have a level of truth that you're willing to see in this moment, and you stop BSing yourself and you say, I actually do want to change. Like, I actually want something different. What's the truth here? And we all know it. It's there. It might be suppressed, but the woman I was talking to was like, oh yeah, for me, it's belonging. And she got it. Like when I said that, she was like, oh yeah, that's my thing. Okay. That's her core wound. Like, I'm never going to belong. And everyone has a different core wound. And again, on our website, we'd go into more depth on core wounds, but you can probably figure this out. Now, the thing that's different, right? The challenge for most people is that they see the pattern, but they can't seem to escape it. As like, I've just had so many, I'm the trusted advisor behind the scenes of so many really super smart women, right? Who are growing businesses, leaders in the industry, all of that. And although their front-facing world is like everything looks good, behind the scenes, they're in a pattern and they're terrified to actually make any changes, because what if they fail? They're super successful over here. Shouldn't I just keep doing the successful thing? They want it so badly, this new thing, but it's like, I don't know that I'm capable. I've tried so many times and I have failed. Why should I try again? And that's, I think that's another way of identifying this. It's not just the pattern, but where you're afraid of failing.
Okay. So people recognize it, right? They understand their patterns. They maybe take, the time with themselves to be honest with themselves. Now what? Right? They're truthful. They're honest. They are now telling themselves like, wow, I've really been BSing myself. I really want this. But how do I get unstuck? Exactly like what you just said. They can't get out of this loop because they're comfortable, they're scared, all of these things. So what do?
The easy answer is, book a call with us, right? Like this is my lane. This is what I love to help women with. Okay. And I know that sounds like self-aggrandizing or like just sort of pushing the business, but truly this is the shortcut, right? This is the way to fast track it and get to the heart of things quite immediately. But really, you have to, there's a methodology. You have to really understand what you desire. You have to understand what's stopping you. What is that denial phase? What are the beliefs? What are your patterns? How do you stop yourself getting your own way? Okay. And you might say, I don't stop. But if you don't have what you want, you've stopped. Okay. So don't BS me. Don't BS yourself. Don't tell me it's just not been time or that hasn't been my priority. If you want it, you would be creating it, or you would have it already if you knew how to do that. Okay. If you weren't deflecting in some manner. I want to go back to one thing. Another way to know if you're deflecting that I didn't share earlier is this idea of productive procrastination. I did a whole podcast on that. Maybe in the show notes, we can put the link to the productive procrastination podcast, because that was a fan favorite. Like, people were like talking to me about productive procrastination for months and years after I did that podcast.
My friends and I joke about productive procrastination because I think it's so easy to do.
Absolutely. So this concept, for those of you who haven't listened, and go back and listen to it, because it's a good teaching, is that when we really want something, but it's scary, it's daunting, we've never done it before, we have some sort of fear around it, we don't know how to do it, whatever that is, we will, as doers, we'll do a bunch of other things, okay, that are really productive, but don't actually move us towards the true goal that we have. So it is a procrastination from the thing that you need to do, but it's productive. And sometimes it's worth it. Okay. Which is the crazy thing. Sometimes it's deflection and you just got to go do the thing, right? It is the next thing that you have to do. And sometimes the productive procrastination is giving you time to process and think things through and to let things percolate so that the true right pathway forward or action or idea or opportunity drops in. And that's where the nuance comes in, because we can BS ourselves and saying, oh, I'm in percolation time, when really you're in deflection time. It's a challenging discernment piece, but you gotta learn how to do that. And this is where becoming your own authority, really self-authority, comes in, and trusting yourself. And if you're your own authority and trusting yourself, if you're getting the results that you actually desire, not just the business results, because generally speaking, you're good at business, right? You're making the money, you're making the impact, you're growing, you're scaling, all of that stuff. There's this thing over here that you haven't made progress on. That's the place I'm talking about. Okay. And we come up with all sorts of rationales. Oh, I can't do both, or this is bigger priority. I need to do this first, or I'll get to that when. And, there's all sorts of things that we deflect.
Do you have a favorite way to productively procrastinate? Like, what's your go-to thing when I'm not trying to give anything away, but we're all human. So let's remember that, like, we all do this. So.
100%. It's changed over time. And what's interesting is that I've kind of come a little bit full circle just recently. So in the beginning, 15 years ago when I started my business, I found myself emptying the dishwasher and cleaning out cabinets and all of that to that has to be done now. My environment has to be like clean and orderly for me to think. And then I realized, okay, that I can't do that. That's just me deflecting, procrastinating. So I put some rules in for myself, some boundaries, like we don't do house cleaning in the middle of the day. And then of course I got a house cleaner, but and I got a nicer house that didn't need as much cleaning because it wasn't like a 1980, like an 1890s house. It was a, modern contemporary house. Anyways, that became less of an issue. I got a personal assistant, right? Like I took those things off the table. But I've just moved across the country and I'm deep in unpacking, and like I gave myself one day to like get it all unpacked on Monday, and like that was legit. We're moved in Saturday, unpacking Sunday, unpacking Monday, right? And then the rest of the week I was going to do it in the evening, and I could just feel myself like I just want to get it done. So there's a little bit of that. Then my productive procrastination was social media. That's not what it is now, but I would go to social media when the thing that I was working on was hard, and okay, I'm just going to distract myself a little bit with that, and that I nipped that in the bud a long time ago. But that was a big way. Now I think that, and maybe some of the listeners will relate, recently over the last few years, that's how we say it. I think it's been through new initiatives, right?
It's like starting and not it's almost like start something and then the new idea comes up.
Yeah. Instead of solving the problem of the marketing initiative or ops initiative that we have in front of us, like actually going deeper there. It's like, this is really important that I need to talk about. Now, there's always, we talk about the 7 shadows of success on our website, on our homepage. And, those 7 shadows have said it, they're part of our success. Also, they're shadows of success. And this starting, like doing the new initiative and diving into something, that's a shadow, but it's also a success, right? Because I understand what needs to be done and I will drive on that, and I will do the thing that I have energy for. This is a big thing for women in particular. Like I'll do the thing that I have energy for that's in front of me if I'm excited about it. And that's been very successful in a lot of ways. So it's, again, nuance and discernment. Are you doing that to such a degree that the things that need to get done the thing that you really desire that might be scary for you to go after is being pushed off. And like, for instance, full transparency here, the thing that I am avoiding right now is the social media stuff that we've been talking about, being less of a brand and more of an individual on social media. And gosh, I've known that for a long time now. And I've come up with all sorts of excuses why we can't do that or why I can't do that or totally outing myself right now on that. But that would be, I know, like, when I'm honest with myself, I know, okay, that's all excuse. That's all deflection. Like, I know that's the thing that needs to happen. Okay, I just outed myself. That means I have to do it differently now. So
now, leverage.
Yes, exactly.
Leverage.
Well, that goes to exactly right. So one of the tips for moving through the challenge I have found is, strangely, because I'd love it to not be the case, but public accountability. Saying that I'm going to do something more publicly you can still blow it off, but I don't personally. Like, when I back in 2018, I signed up to do a marathon, and I ended up posting on social media my training so that I would be accountable to continuing to do this. And I had, a small following that was cheering me on, and other runners who were, giving me insights. And there was no way I was going to be like, yeah, I'm just not going to do it. I knew I hadn't given myself enough time to train, that it was going to be a run walk version of a marathon. And, about mile 10, I should really remember this, but it was either mile 10 or mile 13. My knee went out. I had 3 weeks earlier, I'd done 23 miles, was totally fine. Did the rest between, did the marathon, and my knee went out. And I remember sitting there just stretching it for a minute, and I was pretty slow to begin with. So I was at the tail end of things. And so, but I was sitting there stretching at one of those water stations, and a guy in a van came to clean up that water station. And he's like, do you want to ride back to whatever, the finish line or the base, whatever they called it? And I looked at him. I think it probably scared the bejeebers out of him. I said, swearing alert for all of those of you who are listening with kids out there. I was like, fuck no. Right. And I wouldn't have been able to say that if I hadn't made that public accountability, and I knew that people were, supporting me, looking at me, all of that. And I got over a huge block around not being athletic by doing that. That was leverage for me. So I think public accountability helps. Now, do I wish that I could have done it just for myself, right? And not have needed that public account? Absolutely, right? Yeah, that's the place we want to get to, but use the tools, right? Use the tools at your disposal.
That made me think of, I feel like leverage. I think a lot of us can relate to public accountability, especially in the age of social media. It's so easy to put things in front of people and have to, hold yourself accountable if that's what you do. But I think that there are people whose leverage, public accountability, means nothing to them. They could put something out there and they don't care if they do it or don't do it. So I think part of that, from what I'm hearing, is you have to understand how to make what leverage means to you, right? If I was a person who can post something on social media and not be affected by who sees it, that wouldn't work for me, right? That wouldn't be leverage for me. So I think it's important that there's that distinction. What is your true leverage? But I personally can totally relate to public accountability.
Other ways that I've gotten leverage have been making big investments. So women who run companies understand, and this is particular, I'm going to say to the founder CEO type of women versus the entrepreneurs within corporate, because entrepreneurs within corporate are using other people's money. So they can invest, and there's some accountability to that, right? If your budgets don't work, if you're not making money, you're going to be out of a job. So there's some accountability there, but it's not your money. It might be your paycheck, but it's not your money. Okay. When it's your money, you're putting skin in the game in a different way. And so I've invested huge amounts of money in myself. Let's say I considered it my business, but it was in myself in order to help myself be able to become the person I needed to be to do the thing. Okay. And so that's another form of leverage, investing your own money. There's something about it. Like we just don't want to lose money, right? We just don't want to not make good on that. Now, so that's a really big way to get leverage. I think another way to get leverage, and this is akin to public accountability, but it's more private, which would be it's going to if you don't follow through, it's going to negatively affect someone you love dearly, your lover, your husband, your wife, your kid, right? Someone is going to be let down. Okay. And people who are the providers in their family, right? If they're the primary or only breadwinner, they will do whatever it takes to make that money, right? That's leverage. Okay. If you're not the primary breadwinner, or if it's no longer issue, right? You have plenty of money, right? Then there might be other ways you're letting people down, right? Sometimes we change only under duress, sadly, right? I'm going to divorce you unless, right? Or I can no longer be your friend if this is how the relationship's going to be, right? Like people will put down boundaries, ultimatums, not sometimes it's manipulative, but I'm talking about it from a sort of conscious level 2 perspective, where they're saying this is not okay anymore. This isn't my life. But you see this oftentimes around like alcoholics or drug addicts. Like, they hit bottom and their partners leave them and then they turn things around, right? Like that kind of situation.
I feel like that's often the way people finally make a change for themselves, whatever it is. Like, it's almost like universe kind of gives them a little smack in the face and they're like, oh, like I really need to do that thing that I've been saying I need and want for myself.
This is the primary one that I teach my high level clients now, which is around tapping into spirit, whatever you want to call that. There is a non-seen vibration of the universe that's out there. And when you learn how to tap into that, you will get guidance, direction, clarity, and inspiration to change. And you won't need the kind of hammer leverage that we've been talking about. Public accountability, that's shame. Okay. I'm going to be shamed if I don't do this, right? I'm going to let someone down, a personal person I love. I would feel shame if I didn't do this. Okay. Someone's left me. Right. It's fear-based change. Okay. And like I've said, I've used these to help myself leverage with the investment. Like I'm not going to lose something. That's a loss, a fear of loss, right? To change. I've used all of these. They're not bad. They're useful. They're very useful. But kind or gentle, actually much more powerful, is connecting to all the energy that is this infinite intelligence, this infinite power that exists. And when you do that, that then becomes a power source for your new work in this world, your new way of being that is unlike any other. So that's super powerful.
It's like empowered change versus the fear-based change. I just wrote that down because I was like, that's actually true. Like would be nice to come from that place. I want to ask for one more example of leverage if you can give it. And this is more in the relationship realm, because I think that comes up a lot with your clients and wanting that, fulfilling, exquisite relationship. What kind of leverage do we put there, right? You're not putting money into that. So what is you're not publicly accountable there. So what is the leverage that we can use in that type of situation?
For me, that was just, I wanted it badly enough. Period, full stop. It was a desire worth failing for. And I've been doing this work for a long time. I realized that if I wanted the vision that I had for the exquisite relationship that I had this opportunity to create, I had to be the woman in that vision, not be the woman that I am now. Seeing that differential was enough for me to start making changes. Now, that didn't happen overnight, right? I didn't miraculously snap my fingers and change, but I did it quite rapidly and I did it quite consciously. And I would interrupt myself in my own head where when I was going in one direction, I would choose to go in a different direction. I would stop mid-sentence when I was being not the woman that I wanted to be in that relationship. And I'd just stop. I'd stop talking. I'd be like, oh, I don't want to be that woman. And do it differently. I would apologize or articulate, that's not who I want to be. It's not who I am. That is an aspect of myself, but that is my lesser version. I want to be the more evolved version of myself. I would like a do-over, please. Can I have a do-over? And I would live it differently. I would actually, I talk a lot about you have to have the lived experience of being, doing, having the life that you actually want. You can't create the life that you want without having the lived experience of it, right? You actually have to live it. Okay. Now, initially you're living it in your imagination, but then ultimately when you have the opportunity in front of you, you have to make the decisions to live into that vision. Most people don't. Most people go back to the old way because that's what we were talking about earlier with the subconscious mind. It's much easier to do that. Instead, you have to live into this new experience and make a different decision. Now, as I just said, I would ask for a do-over. I'm like, oh, I was not living into the experience that I wanted. And I would recognize that. And instead of saying, oh, that's okay, or make it an excuse or be a victim about it or not take personal responsibility or say, well, I had to be that way because he was this way, blah, 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 any number of things. I'd be like, can I have a do-over? Here's how I want this to go. Right. And I would do the do-overs in my mind. I would do the do-overs out loud until that was who I was being. And, and what ended up happening is I would stop myself sooner. Whether it was a conversation with him, a decision about how to use my time, my energy, how I was showing up. And I still fail, I still am not, 100%.
So it kind of sounds to me like compassion is a big piece of this entire process. You keep talking about, you were mentioning how, you would ask for a redo. And to me, that sounds like compassion, and you would need to have a lot of self-compassion to be able to actually stop deflecting on your desires. So would you agree with that? What do you have to say about that?
I would absolutely agree with that, Ariana. And I think it's a really astute point that you picked up on there, that part of this is really being kind to yourself, not having that same I have to be perfect all the time attitude. And I get, when we're building businesses, here's the analogy. Here's the transferable skill. When you're building a business, you have exacting standards, right? You have a level of excellence that you're going for. And you know that there's iteration, right? You know that when you're building out a strategy, you're going to have a high level of expectation for yourself, and you're going to iterate until you get there, that it's not going to be perfect right out of the bat. You need to hold both. It's the same thing here. You have to have a high standard for yourself, right? Your standards are high. This is my vision for myself. This is what it's going to look like. This is the expectation of who I want to be, who is, and being is the essence of who you are. It incorporates the doing, the energy behind it. Also, it's not just the doing, it's the come from energy. And you have a high standard, and you're not necessarily there yet because you haven't lived that yet. You have to iterate. So that's the transferable skill. And when you're doing that in business, sometimes you have compassion for yourself because you understand that it's an iterative process. And sometimes you're quite harsh with yourself, and that doesn't get you, it might push you forward. It might pull you forward, but you're going to have a miserable time of it, right? That's not the fun part of the journey. The fun part of the journey is looking at it and going, oh yeah, this is me learning. This is me growing. This is me doing the thing. Okay. I did not nail that. I have work to do, but you're talking to yourself and in a way that's compassionate. It doesn't let you off the hook. I think that's where a lot of really driven women get into trouble is they confuse compassion with letting yourself off the hook. No, you still have the high standards. You're still going for that high level of results, execution, way of being, but you're still being compassionate and kind when you're not there yet. You're saying, okay, I'm not there yet. I'm still growing and I have work to do. You're not saying, oh yeah, everything's fine. Like no work to do here. I'm all that and more. No, you got places to go, right? Still. So compassion is big, and we have to define it well so that we don't misunderstand it to be anything goes.
Off the hook. Yeah.
Right. Because then we don't grow. Then we don't actually achieve the thing that we desire. We're in deflection again. Okay. So the kind of compassion that a lot of people engage in is that sort of like, oh, you get a pass. Like, yeah, 5th place is totally fine. No, of course it's not. Okay. Like for women who get this, we're not handing out 5th place trophies. We're just not. Okay. We're saying, okay, great. You entered the race. You did good. You're getting there. And I'm proud of you. It's not without being proud. Like, it's not this either or thing, right? That concept of no 5th place trophies is like, oh, well, if you're not in 1st, you effed up. That's not what I'm saying either. But I'm saying don't look at it like I have to always be in 1st to be kind to myself. And you got work to do if you landed in 5th or 8th or 10th or 20th or 30th, right? Like you still got work to do, and just like own that. Doesn't make you wrong, doesn't make you bad. It just means in this arena, you still have work to do.
Probably the biggest question is, okay, you're giving me all this great information. I know I'm deflecting. What do I do? And you mentioned a few things. You mentioned leveraging. You mentioned, having desires worth failing for. What else? Is there anything else that people can do, especially on their, maybe on their own, to stop this cycle and get out of it and finally get what they actually want?
Yeah, I think really the best thing that someone can do on their own is have that level of honesty with yourself. You know where you are actually not living up to your expectations of what you desire. And again, it's nuanced. I'm not saying perfection at any cost, right? Like, when you've done your best, and when you're saying, I should do this when you really should do this. You're saying, I should go left. That's the that's the overt thing that you're saying, but you really should go right, because right's going to be the tougher path, the challenging path, but it's going to get you to what you want. I think that's the biggest thing you can do for yourself. It's that level of honesty.
Awesome. So is there anything else that you want to say on the topic to wrap up?
I think we've covered a lot. You asked great questions, and, I think there's a lot for people to dig into here. It might be one of those episodes that you want to listen to twice or 3 times, because that's actually one of the things that I've learned over the years. It's a success strategy, is to listen to things 2, 3, 4, 5 times, because inevitably our mind kind of pays attention, then goes off someplace else, and then comes back again. And we miss big chunks. We think we've listened to the whole thing, and yet we miss things. So this might be one of those ones that you listen to 2, 3, 4 times, because there was a lot of rich detail in this and a lot of how-tos. And so I would do that. I would start applying what you've heard. And then for those of you who, time is your most valuable resource and you want to fast track this, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I will mention it again. This is what we do in that first conversation. When you go with me, when you go on our website, there's a schedule now button. And if you are someone who's a founder, a CEO, an entrepreneur who's reached a level of success and is asking themselves, now what? How do I create that exquisite life that is both integrates both my business and so much more? And you're wondering how to move past some of the shadows of success that we have described on our homepage, and to move through our core wounds that keep us limited. If this is, you're like, okay, this all makes sense to me, I want to fast track this. That's what the conversation with me is about. It's a no obligation conversation. I'm not going to twist your arm or anything into anything, but it's there to help you identify what your core wound is and what's really holding you back from what you really want. And to also clarify what you really want, because oftentimes, as we said at the beginning of this episode, we deflect away from what we really want. And as smart as we are as individuals, we're doing this to ourselves. We hide from ourselves because the thing that we really want is oftentimes the most scary, because we want it so badly and we haven't yet achieved it. So if you want to fast track things, that's where to go to fast track it. And the website is theunstoppablewoman.com, and you can find all sorts of resources there as well. So that's where I would lead people to and wrap up with.
Thank you so much. This was great. It's a topic I've thought about a lot, so I'm glad we got to talk about it, because I'm walking away with my own insights, and I'll probably have to listen to it again for some of the things that you said.
Thank you for picking this topic. I think it's been a great topic. Pick more topics like this. I love them. And thank you all for being loyal listeners. If this or tuning in for the first time, please leave a comment, give us a 5-star review. Let us know what landed for you in the comments. If you're listening to this on YouTube, I read those comments. So please let me know, what do you feel like you're deflecting right from? What desire are you saying, no, I can't have right now? Or what do you feel like your core wound is? I'd love to know. Okay, with that, we're a wrap, and we'll catch you in the next episode of The Unstoppable Woman. Keep being unstoppable, and here's to your exquisite life. Until next time. Bye-bye.